So, welcome to the second video in our little coaster workshop. The second coaster is going to be a bit simpler than the first one. It's going to be one that has a ribbon around the outside, just like that. And it uses only two stamps, two tools. One of them you know from the first one. It's the Camouflage tool, the one with the two pointy heels, as we call them, and then the starburst. And the other one we didn't use before, is a simple beveler, it's called. The beveler is usually used in carving leather, but we're going to use it in this stamping project. And if you look at it from the side, you'll see that just like the Camouflage tool, it's got one side that's a little bit higher, or when you turn the tool around and stamp a little bit lower. That's the business end of the tool. So that's the edge with which we stamp into the leather that goes the deepest, and then it kind of fades out towards the other side. Now I'm going to put the camera down and show you how to use this tool, do a little practice with it before we actually get to the coaster. So for those of you that got the kits, in your kits there should be a piece of leather to practice on, and some of them are like this half circle, half coaster. Others are just a bit irregular shape. So let's get it wet again, just like we did before. One comment about getting leather wet is always get the whole thing wet. If you're working on a project, even if you're just going to be stamping on one area, get the whole thing wet. If you just get one area wet, and after it dries, you will see the line between where it was wet and where it wasn't wet. So always get your whole project wet, and then it will dry evenly and you won't see it afterwards. And again, we get it pretty good and wet, so the water is going to be through halfway. You might as well get the blank coaster wet at this point as well. And we're going to let that sit for a while we do a little bit of practice on the practice piece of leather, just to let the surface dry again a bit. Set that off to the side. Dry up my work surface here a bit. So holding this tool again, if you're right-handed, you have your hammer in your right hand and the tool in your left hand. You hold it with your thumb and pointer finger, and then your other fingers down, so that you're actually resting on the leather and resting the tool with its business end out towards the front on the leather. And they have the tool straight up and down, so not tilted to any one side, straight up and down, and give it a couple of knocks, and you should see that it gives an impression like that. Tilt it up maybe a little bit more. You can do a couple more just to see what kind of an impression that it gives. You can tell the surface of the leather is a little bit too wet yet, actually. Should have let it dry a little bit more because it's kind of mushy, and that's when it makes a ridge like that. Now you can tilt this tool to one side or to the other, and that's what we want to do later when we're doing the ribbon. So we're going to practice that. So put the tool down and then tilt it towards yourself and give it a little hit, and then you'll see that it just does a small impression on the one side. If you do it right next to it now but tilt it away from you, you'll get the other corner. So you can do a couple of those just to practice, straight up and down, and then tilting it away from you, tilting it towards you, just to see the different types of impressions that makes. By the way, you can do the same thing with the camouflage tool. Again, holding it, a little bit of downward pressure, straight up and down, makes an impression like this. If you tilt it to one side, you'll just get half of an impression. If you tilt it to the other side, you just get half of impression that way. Sometimes you use the tools that way on different projects, but this one we're just going to be using straight up and down on the coaster project that we're doing today. Okay, you can take the coaster now that we're going to be stamping, and the first thing we're going to do is draw a couple of lines, guidelines. So take your compass or wing divider if you have one, and the first line, the one closest to the edge, is going to be exactly 1 centimeter from the edge. 1 centimeter or 7 sixteenths. 7 sixteenths inches if you're going by inches, or 1 centimeter from the outside. And again, hold your wing divider or compass back so it's kind of leaning at a 45-degree angle towards you, and the two tips at the front pointing towards the center of the coaster, and then turn your coaster, and you don't have to make a very deep impression, just a very light, very light impression of that line on the coaster. Keeping the outside tip on your work surface and the inside tip with a very light pressure on the coaster. So you should have one line like that, all the way around on the outside, 1 centimeter from the edge. The second line is going to be about 16 millimeters, 1.6 centimeters from the outside. Actually a little bit more. Just a minute, let me check this here. One point seven centimeters, so 17 millimeters, or 11 sixteenths of an inch. 11 sixteenths of an inch, or 17 millimeters. And then again, just like we did before, we'll make that second line all the way around, making sure the two tips of the compass or wing divider are always pointing towards the center. So you should have two parallel lines going around your coaster like that. Now we're going to start with the inside line, the one closer to the center, and we're going to start with our camouflage tool. The points, the two heels, are going to be pointing towards the outside of the coaster, and the deepest part of the camouflage tool in that half circle here, the deepest part of this half circle is going to be, let me show it to you like this. So right in here, that deepest part of the half circle is going to be right on the line. I'll do one impression and then show it to you. So the deepest part is right on that line with the two heels pointing towards the outside edge of the coaster. The next impression is going to be with the heel right in the heel of the previous. Not sure how you can see it best. The heel of the previous impression, and then again the deepest part of that circle on the line. I'll make the impression and show you. So it should look like that. So they overlap. The heels, the previous heel and the next one are in the same spot. And we go all the way around like this. And just like with what we did last time on the first coaster, when we're starting to get close to closing the circle, we stop and we just do a very light impression, just with a tiny little bit, so I can see where that next tip is going to end up. So I can see if I'm going to be close. And here I would be off by a little bit. I would be just a little bit over. So I'm going to try and overlap just a little bit more, especially on the inner circle. We want to rather have it overlap a little bit more than a little bit less, because the inner circle is tighter than the outer circle. But here, just to make sure I don't end up with half, like here I would end up with half. I don't want to end up with half of an impression. I'm going to just come back, not even a millimeter, maybe half a millimeter. And then the next one, half a millimeter. And the next one, half a millimeter. And the next one, half a millimeter. And then the last one should be just about right. There we go. Now we come to the outside circle. This time, the two heels, the two pointy parts of the tool, are going to be facing towards the middle of the coaster. And they're going to be offset by a little bit, so they're exactly in the middle of the circles that the inside tools gave us. I'll do one and then you'll see what I mean. So right on the line again, that deepest part of the circle in the tool, with the two heels pointing right into the middle of the line of the two impressions on the inside. So this is what's going to give us the wavy part of the ribbon that goes around. It's going to look like a ribbon. Now on the outside, because the outside circle is bigger, we cannot go directly overlapping into the heel. We have to be just a little bit stretching it out. And what you do is you always put the further heel, not the one that's overlapping, but the next one right into the middle of the next circle. So you always kind of look at where the next one is going to go, so it's right in the middle of the next impression on the inside. And then you just keep going that way. Sometimes you have to stretch it a little bit, have a millimeter space in between, but that's going to be covered up afterwards. You're not going to see that afterwards. So right here, for example, that's this last one that I just did. You can see right here that I have a little bit of space between the two. I had to pull this one over a little bit so that this heel right here is exactly in the middle of this. And that's how we're going to go all the way around now. Here we don't have to stop to make sure that we're going to be ending up evenly, because we have to, because we're always centering each one, and we know that the inside circle ended up perfectly, so we know the outside one will too. There we go. That's what it should look like once we're all the way around, inside and outside. Now what we're going to do is take the other tool, and this is where it's going to be a little bit tricky to make sure you get this right. So we're going to start on the outside circle and go counterclockwise around, putting a little bit of a bevel with this beveler. And we're always going to, so you're going to have a look at each one of these kind of circles here, and because we're going counterclockwise around, go around the circle, and then right here, the extension of this line, as if this circle kept going into this, onto the ribbon, that's where we're going to make a little mark. And then on this one here, and on this one here. So an extension of that, an extension of this over to here. I'll show you on one what I mean. And this is where we're going to lean. So the beveler is going to be facing us in terms of the deeper edge is going to be facing us, and we're going to lean it towards the outside of the coaster. So we don't cut across the whole ribbon with the bevel. We're just going to get, and it just needs a little hit, a tiny little hit like that. Right here, I made that little hit, whoops. Just like that. And then go around counterclockwise on each one. Just a little tiny tap. Okay, so the outside is done. Now we're going to do the inside circle, and again we're going to go around counterclockwise. And again, coming around the half circle, and on that side we're going to put a little bevel. And again, the beveler is going to be facing us. The longer edge is going to be facing us, but this time it's going to be tipped towards me, not away from me like on the outside. It's going to be tipped towards me. So just a little. So right here you can see that. Tip towards me. Here's the business edge on this side, and it's tipped towards me. And the bevelers, it's like it's following this line around and then straight across, but only about halfway across. Just a light tap. There we go. Now that really makes that ribbon have like a 3D kind of a look. Makes it kind of pop out. And that's the second of our coasters.